Hi there, I'm Atul from London, and I'm very excited to be live streaming again this morning. Very, very special guest, all the way from Wiltshire, in on a connection there. Yeah, my next guest was a primary teacher in the classroom for 25 years. Met her initially at a whole bunch of maths conferences, so she's got a maths teaching background as well. But these days, yeah, she's been teaching online and in person, and she's moved on to teaching handwriting. A big welcome to Nikki Parr.
Oh, thanks, Nata. Really nice to come on and have a chat.
Yeah,
It's,
yeah, maybe you can tell us a bit more about your background, how you got into handwriting teaching, and what you're doing right now. A little bit of a little bit of your own story.
a bit of background, a little bit of get to know me. Okay, yeah, lovely. So, yeah, my background is primary teaching, classroom teaching for the majority of that. Last few years, particularly spent working with children with additional needs in mainstream classrooms. And I have a particular interest in additional needs. My own children are young adults now, 23 and 20. My son is dyspraxic, and they both have, my son and my daughter have ADHD. So, of course, that was a really big motivation for me to get interested, to support them, but also to transfer all of that into my classroom practice. So, in terms of how I've evolved to where I am now, I guess it's kind of just chance in some ways. And I relocated from London to Wiltshire, and that was the point where I left my formal classroom role and had a good think about what I wanted to do. And in leaving that area where I'd been doing some maths tuition with students alongside my classroom practice, they didn't want to stop with the tutoring. And the only way that I could continue to work with them was to move into online tutoring. So that was a whole new learning curve and experience for me. Really, really glad that those circumstances led to that, because it's been fantastic. So those students of mine were moving from primary to secondary, and it was just a long time since I'd done maths to key stage 3, key stage 4 GCSE level. And it was a great opportunity for me just to re-explore a love of maths that I've always had. I don't see myself as a mathematician. I'm really always in awe of maths teachers and mathematicians and the way they see the world, in a slightly different way, I think, to the way that I do. But you know what I mean there?
Yeah. We're very passionate about seeing it in the way we see it. Yes, but
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
everyone's a
And
mathematician to me, but it's just a definition
different
or the
levels,
way
isn't
people see
it?
it. Yeah,
Different levels.
yeah.
And I just think, like, from my experience in primary, there are a lot of pupils who really struggle to see things, in the way that some people do. So anyway, through that desire to like reboost and relearn some of my knowledge so that I could support students, I actually came across Complete Maths, which I have to give the biggest shout out to. I love that community. I learned so much. I've been to all kinds of workshops that Mark has run and come to the maths conferences, and it gave me a really big boost in terms of being able to teach really effectively myself. So can't recommend Complete Maths enough. But what I realised, what I then did was because I was setting up my own work rather than going back into the classroom, I was part of some business communities. And through that, just by chance, somebody reached out and asked me for support as an adult with handwriting. Someone said, can anybody help? I was like, oh, yeah, I can do that. And it rekindled all of the knowledge and experience that I have. Because as I said, Jack is dyspraxic, my son, and that was identified very, very early when he was 3, because his speech wasn't developing. And it wasn't that he wasn't capable of learning speech, it was just that the messages weren't getting to the muscles that needed to operate for effective speech. So, alongside teaching, helping him learn to speak, I was very, very aware of just how important it was going to be for him to develop writing skills, because so much of school, even though we're in this digital age, so much is handwritten, and that's such a focus.
Mm.
So I was really, really fortunate in that I got to work alongside a range of occupational therapists and expand my learning at that stage way beyond anything that I'd had through any teacher training or even just personal development researching.
Mm.
So I became aware of just how important the neurological processes are and how we learn skills and how we develop motor skills. So yeah, I got to a point where that was, that actually what is my passion, what is my love, and what are the skills that I can bring to a wider audience, and that's how I developed where I am now. So I actually set up my own business, and my really big desire is to support teachers and parents in supporting their children and their students.
Mm.
There's a lack of CPD. There's a lack of really in-depth subject knowledge available to teachers.
Yeah, I mean, maths for some reason as a subject and a community is it's highly developed and evolved. The CPD network and training networks, and my other thing is I teach the sciences as well, and even the sciences, which in some ways are fairly similar to maths. The CPD or teacher or tutor networks aren't as evolved in maths, and again, dyscalculia is it's a little world of its own, and again, that's yeah, I mean, we're very, very lucky to have such an evolved network of maths, and I think what you're doing now is kind of being inspired by, we don't work for LaSalle or Complete Maths, but inspired by how the network they've set up and in the way in which these connections are made, and stuff is interlinked. You need good handwriting, or whatever you call good handwriting. You need handwriting to do a lot of stuff, including maths, and so you've obviously realized that.
It's not just about presentation in terms of like putting the best piece of work on the wall. Handwriting is part of how we process information. There's a lot of research to show that we get sensory feedback from the way we form letters and words, and actually we kind of slow down the process of thinking, and it allows deeper thinking. So I don't know what's your experience in terms of the level of maths that you sometimes do.
Yeah, no, I'm also, yeah, I just want to tell everyone this is live, so this is your live stream actually. So just put in questions, say hello from wherever you are. Amalie has just said hello. On the Maths Tutors group, we're on the Maths Tutors group here, and on my profile on Twitter, on my Facebook page. So wherever you see us, I've got like multiple screens. I'm keeping an eye as much as possible on everywhere. So just ask us any question.
I would love to hear from any teachers, but maths teachers in particular, about what that process of the thought process and how they express that through handwriting, through the stages of their development, and what they see with their students as well. I'd love to hear any experiences from anyone watching.
Yeah. So I think you mentioned your son is dyspraxia, and I think from my understanding that's nowadays called developmental
coordination delay, DCD.
So what is it? Just to explain in more detail, what's like the overall? It's an umbrella term, I believe.
It's one of the series of prefrontal cortex neurological differences. Now, I like to think of it through myself. Our brains. We have to remember that our brains are evolving and have continued to evolve over many, many thousands of years. And to me, a lot of these differences are just different stages of evolution, and sometimes different. So that's why people have different strengths. We label people with ADHD, developmental coordination delay, various dyslexia. They're all just slightly different wirings of our brains. And with dyspraxia, with developmental coordination delay, for me, in my experience with students at school, and obviously through many, many years with my son, it is just this slight misfiring. The messages from the brain not always quite getting to certain muscles, and so it affects coordination. It's broader than that. It's wider than that. It also affects some visual perception development, which is a really important part of handwriting. So, for example, my early images of Jack's writing, he mirror wrote. He wrote from right to left and he reversed letters. Now, he was never taught to do that. That's to do with the way that that stage of his development, the way he perceived these abstract shapes that are letters. That was how he was seeing it.
Right.
And you can train visual perception. Formula One drivers have to do a lot of hand-eye coordination and training their visual perception so they can see things on the periphery.
Right.
Right. All kinds of sports skills. All of these motor skills involve so much more than just the motor control. So that's really, so with what I found with dyspraxia and with my son was that it's not that people can't learn things, they need to overlearn them. Right. And that needs really good teaching, really specific, really direct teaching. And so one of the things could be in terms of going on journeys. Often there's a lot of issues around shape perception and direction. So there are strategies that you employ though. So for example, when my son first started to go somewhere, he might get on a bus and go somewhere and then he wouldn't be able to get back. You reverse the process or find a different alternative way of getting back. So again, it's a rehearsal, going out and practicing a route and then getting things wrong and finding solutions when you're out and about doing those things.
Right. Okay, great. So, yeah, I mean, you've already kind of asked me, but we were talking earlier, and you have this amazing quote on handwriting that everyone has a handwriting story. So I think we could
I really believe
stories from everyone and yourself and myself. Yeah,
everyone has a handwriting story. It's something that we all learn to do, and it's so connected to our childhood, obviously, because that's when we first learn. It's where we first get a sense of how we feel about it as well. So there can be, in my experience, you have two types of people that either feel really good about that early experience or people that feel really bad about it. So I'm very fortunate. My early experiences, my early memories are really positive. So I remember learning to write my name with my dad. I can literally remember sitting at the table with him. And maybe because I've got 3 older brothers and I wanted to keep up with what they could do, they're a bit older than me, I was so determined to write my name. And I remember making him sit down, and I'm sure he got really fed up with it. But it was time with my dad. It was a good experience, and I was really proud of what I achieved. And then I went on, and I have a memory of winning a handwriting competition. I still got the prize that I won when I was 6. I got second prize. Didn't matter that it wasn't first prize. So I got all these wonderful, very positive experiences around handwriting. And as I was saying to you, I wonder everybody else, can you remember learning to write your name? Can you remember learning to write your name when you were young, Atul?
Yeah, we had this little, it's a lovely Twitter thread where you asked the same question and a few people replied. And I remember when I got my first passport, actually, I was living in Nairobi at the time, and I just started primary school. And my dad took me into this photo studio where you take a picture. So I have very clear memories of going to that photo studio. I can't remember how old I was, probably 4 or 5. And then I got the passport, or on the form, he said, "Can you write your name on it, like the way we've been doing?" Like from social cues, I probably figured out that this is quite an important time to be writing my name. So I was very, very slow and cautious about it. And I remember going very slowly, writing A-T. It's in English, so I should also say at that time English wasn't my first language, Hindi was. So I would be writing Hindi probably more than English, actually. So someone whose is second language, for some reason doing English is more of a big deal than Hindi, actually, because that's the other language you study, and so that's the other thing you need to be able to do. And I wrote that out, and I remember been quite proud of myself actually. It was
Yeah.
written very slowly, cautiously. And my mum has my old passport, and I saw it a few years ago. I think like a couple of years ago, and I thought, with my old picture as a 4 or 5 year old, looking quite worried on the photograph, and I was like, I thought, oh, that's the cutest thing ever. It's like a
Yeah.
little me coming back to me saying,
Yeah, it's a connection, and I think because we all learn, one of the first things we all learn to write is our names, and so that whole embodiment of us and our identity is expressed through writing, through handwriting. So yeah, I'd love to know if anybody else is watching what their early memories of writing are, and if they remember writing their name, and whether it was a good experience or a bad experience. Because it's not always easy, and sometimes there's a lot of stress around having to perform and do. I think it's important to remember that. Yeah.
great. I've got a cracking story on that links everything up we're doing actually: handwriting, maths, art, and online tutoring.
Ooh. Okay,
So
go ahead.
yeah, well, I'll try to make it as short as possible, not ramble on it. Is you are the guest after all. So now I'm ending with a 2T now. Actually, who's in year 13, so she's doing maths as well as some other subjects, and she's got an offer from Cambridge, so she's almost certainly going there. And but I started with her in year 6 when the parents asked me to do a little bit of extra tutoring for her. I think it was 11 plus entry exam preparation, and they were quite anxious that this child has ADHD. Yeah, and her passion was actually, when I used to teach her, I used to teach her in person. So I used to go to a flat, and I'd be teaching her, but she was one of these really, really chatty people. Like, chatting is a distraction out of maths, and it's very, very smart. Some children are so good at it; they know exactly the right questions to ask the tutor to get them away from the actual maths or science or whatever you're doing. She was very good at it, and she asked really good questions as well. Actually, even mathematically. But what she would always do is, I would be teaching her something, and she'd be doodling away in the corner, and that would frankly annoy me. I would think, she's not paying attention to me. She's actually doodling away in the corner. Like, I'm sitting, I can see you doodling in the way. Are you paying attention to me? And so we got her I got her to stop doing that as much. In retrospect, of course, yeah, I'll come to that as well.
Let's
And
talk about that in a minute.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And with her handwriting again, she was extremely self-conscious. Actually, to the point that she would see my handwriting and she would say that's bad handwriting, because she was so self-aware of her own handwriting that she had this idea of perfection with her handwriting. But that's only because she happens to be an extremely good artist, actually, a graphic artist. I didn't know that part of her persona at all, like that's what she's into. So when she was doodling, she was actually doodling really quite intricate graphics, but for me it was a distraction from the session, so I didn't pay attention to what the doodles were. And then a few years later, so she didn't get into the school she wanted to. She stayed at the same school. We continued the maths. One part of maths, I realized in teaching maths, the handwriting element to me is not that important. But what's important to me is the use of white space and the layout and the structure you give to things. To be more specific about it, say we're working with linear algebra, say 2x plus 1 equals 3. So you solve that by subtracting 1 from both sides, but it is like a very logical layout, and the equal signs, if it remains centered in the middle of the whole process, that makes actually the process easier to understand, that because the equal sign is like
Balance.
is the pivot of it all, actually. So this is very common in this linear algebra situation. The equal signs all over the place for 2Ts. So I insist that the equal sign is kept in the middle. It took me quite a few goes with her to keep that equal signs in the middle. And I mean, now she's in sixth form, so it can waver around a little bit. But at that time, the structure was very important. So in teaching her that structure, and this is a long time ago. I mean, I had this before any CPD I'd had, but in keeping that structure, the use of white space, not having too much clutter, now which I know as like cognitive load, visual cognitive load, it has to be kept clean. So for me, that's the thing I work on with her. And when we moved online, she was she was still doodling on bit paper. Actually, this is this interactive digital
Yeah,
paper
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
But for some reason, it didn't bother me because I wasn't right in front of her, and even her like ADHD, like a movement or talking a lot, that didn't bother me either. Because what happens online is you focus more on the actual maths and the process than the kind of this interaction between two people that are very close, seated close together. And so it didn't bother me, and I started paying attention to the doodles. They were actually, wow, this is a really good doodle. I remember doing vectors with her, and she made a snake in like about, well, I don't know, 15 seconds. And the vector snake, she called it. I said, this is really good. This is a really good drawing. Have you got any more? And can you
Yeah,
maybe do your...
there's some really interesting things in what you said there. So one
Mm,
is that because obviously having both a son and a daughter with ADHD, I've had a lot of that opportunity to observe and learn an awful lot. And they present often the characteristics present quite differently.
mm,
And it's interesting that you're describing a girl with ADHD, like my daughter. And one of the things about ADHD is just that almost needing to move to regulate the system.
mm,
And that can be through the voice. So you'll often find that there's a lot of talking. That's a way of moving and regulating. And so singing, talking, that stream that you can find quite difficult because you have to try and filter through it,
mm.
is actually part of that regulation.
Right.
And that's also the case with doodling. So when I was class teaching, there are certain children who I would encourage to doodle because the actual act of doodling is what enables them to process what you're saying. They need to move to regulate, and actually the effort put into being still and being silent means that they can't take in what you're saying.
Yeah.
So when my son was small, I would always, a lot of people say bedtime story. The child should be laying down and you read them to sleep. But actually, in our house, it was he would play with Lego, or he would draw. He would be drawing. He'd be drawing things while I was reading, and that's what calmed his system down.
Right.
So,
Yeah, it's fascinating actually. Yeah, because nowadays, exactly, I've discovered the same thing, and I've talked to a few other tutors who have ADHD students. Some are specialists actually, and they say students have that's their way of self-regulating. It's even in the early days, I asked her like, "Why are you doing this?" She says, "Oh, I don't feel stressed. It releases stress." And then now, of course, I understand.
she's processing things, and those visual images. Our brains are primed to think visually, not in abstract terms. So this is part of what I teach in the guides that I produced. In terms of writing, modern humans have been around for about 200,000 years. We've only been writing for about 5,000 years. And that I love that, because that's another nice link there. Really, writing evolved because of maths. That to count and mark, make and track, and barter and trade. But the way our brains developed visual perception was always around survival. And you needed to be able to recognise whether this was a saber-toothed tiger, or this was a saber-toothed tiger, or this. So our brains were used to seeing objects from you needed to know from any angle what that object was, because it was either going to be a threat to you or it's going to be something that would help you. And then when we come to writing, and we've got these abstract symbols, letters like B and D, that are essentially the same thing but in reverse.
Yeah.
You've got to learn to distinguish between them. And that's a classic example of development that you see in primary school. And children have a lot of BD confusion.
Brilliant. We've got more users tuning in. Actually, we've got my good friend Deepak. Deepak is saying, "What is true handwriting? Sometimes handwriting is quite different, not so good when we write at a faster speed. Not sure this is true for everyone." And he says, "I'm glad you guys are talking about handwriting in maths." And my good friend Henry Dingle, that I used to live stream with a lot before, he's got young children actually, so it's quite relevant to him as well. Thanks so much for the live stream, Atul and Nikki. So maybe you can talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is really important to me. For me, there are three main things with handwriting. The person needs to feel good about their writing, because the brain moves away from pain and towards pleasure, in simple terms. So if you don't like doing something, you're not going to want to do it. So you've got to feel good about your handwriting. And as we've just described, we can't help it. There's kind of we have a sense that our handwriting is going to be judged. So a lot of adults that I work with, and I've worked with people in the last year in Canada, in Switzerland, in Scotland, they're people that are very successful in their fields and in business, and yet they have this sort of self-consciousness around handwriting, so that maybe employees might judge them because of it, or that you know, in terms of meetings, no, not everyone. Some people are absolutely confident and don't worry about that, but some people, it's like, and it goes back to a lot of these childhood sort of experiences, I think. So the first thing for me with handwriting is that we want people to feel good about it, and that's kind of my role when I work with people one-to-one, but also my huge goal of supporting teachers, because I want to help as many people as possible, and supporting parents, because it can become extremely stressful, and then if there's stress around it, then that's can be a negative experience. So it's feeling good. That's my first thing. Clearly, it's communication. You know, that is the purpose. Whether we're communicating for ourselves, making notes for something, or whether we're sending a letter to someone, and it's the purpose of that communication. You know, if I'm going to just write a quick note to say I've gone to the shop to be back in 5 minutes, I don't need to do that in my best handwriting. But if I want to make an impression and stand out, and to be honest, I got my first teaching job because of my handwriting, alongside of my other qualifications. It was pre-digital, you'll be surprised. Right.
Yeah.
But I literally was told that my handwriting was one of the features that got me through to the selection process. So, and I think, I don't want to digress, but that's particularly important to me in terms of maths. So I know you were saying that you didn't feel handwriting is that important. It's important if your digits aren't clear and your sixes and zeros look different, or your ones look like sevens, or it's amazing how much confusion there can be in maths with digit formation, particularly when students are writing quickly. And the reason that's a problem in maths, I see, is that children have issues sometimes copying from a source, from a board, and that's to do with their working memory, often holding the image. But so they can copy things incorrectly, and then they're working on a calculation that's got incorrect digits. They can also then, when they're working through a process, if their digits aren't clear, when they go back to check the process, they can make errors because they're reading their own writing incorrectly.
Right.
And of course, when you come to assessments and exams, if an examiner, if a teacher assessing cannot read digits clearly, then they can't award marks. And one thing I see very often in maths is that children will write a digit and then they'll correct it. But rather than crossing out and writing next to it, they'll write the different digit on top of the existing one.
Yeah, very common.
And there's no way for someone externally to know which one they mean. So communication is absolutely crucial. So that's my number one. My number one is how somebody feels. Number two is communication. And the biggest thing for me is use. It's such a valuable tool to be able to write by hand. If you enjoy it, it's a great way, isn't it, of getting thoughts out of your head and anchoring them onto paper. So it's really for supporting mental health. Got everything tumbling around your head and you don't know, you get overwhelmed. Just simply listing what you notice in your head can help you, and when it's anchored to the page, you can see, and then your brain can start to problem solve. So I absolutely don't think handwriting should always be perfect. For me, what we want to do in primary school is work on children developing a really clear, automated, fluent style, so the unconscious mind takes over that process. And then at secondary, obviously, I think it's really quite nice for teenagers to start to experiment and develop a more personal style and, slant their letters if they want, or add some quirky bits. It's
Yeah.
how they evolve their personalities. But
Yeah.
we've got to teach children how to write at speed.
Mm.
And the danger I see sometimes is that we have, in terms of trying to get writing really good at primary,
Mm.
we can develop a sense that it has to be perfect all the time.
Mm.
And I have known students where there's an issue with perfectionism developing.
Mm.
And so I've had experience of a student who was getting so much praise for beautiful handwriting that became how it had to be.
Mm.
So she set her alarm in the night and get up and rewrite her work at 2 in the morning.
Yeah, yeah.
And then get incredibly distressed and angry if a teacher made some comment over it and their handwriting was messy.
Mm.
It can sound quite hard to believe, but this is actual experiences that I've come across, and these are some of the stories that evolve. So
yeah, no, I can imagine. Yeah, I mean, yeah, just to Deepak's again saying thanks for tuning in, Deepak. Actually, thanks, Nikki Natal. I remember from my school days about the challenge of writing visually, looking good, it looks good, as well as faster during exams. That's such a we can talk about that for ages, right? It's not just maths, but English, history, science, or pretty much everything else, isn't it? So that pressure.
It's another skill, and it needs practice. Like anything we want to get better at, we need some instruction. We need someone with experience. We need to experience things ourselves, and we need to have the opportunity to practice. Often, obviously, I'm observing and looking for sources of information and stories and experiences all the time. So one of the things I've done is looked at student chat threads, and there's an immense number of there's a huge amount of stress for students about will an examiner be able to read my writing? They actually write little messages sometimes apologising on their exam papers. And it's the other thing is that when it's been shown in MRI scans that anxiety takes up working memory. So if a student in an assessment is worrying about whether their handwriting can be read and it's going to cost them marks, or they might fail because of it, then they're taking up capacity that they need for retrieval of their information and to formulate their answers. So we want to get rid of that anxiety. We need a nice automated style that they feel really comfortable, but they even have to think about, really.
Yeah, and I really like that in maths. I sometimes tell my tutees, so going back to this students are just a very great case study for everything. And eventually we moved on to bit paper, and I was seeing the art flourish. So we went from one week to the other, and she'd be producing this amazing artwork. And this tutee has now become like the poster of drawing beautiful artwork. She does artwork in all other platforms, but on bit paper as well, to the extent where bit paper offered her in an internship. The CEO, Leo Evans, really was impressed by in some ways I saw the real talent this tutee has and brought it forward to bit paper, and then bit paper got recognized, and the tutee's got another internship. So in some ways, like, the tutee's nearly got a job in bit paper before even starting university. And yeah, again, it was learning online as well. It takes a little bit of practice actually on the graphics tablet. And with everything, one of the things I love about the gift that teaching gives you is that you yourself, you understand, the process of learning, and you never stop learning. You never know everything. I now know a lot about handwriting. I've had so many years of experience through my children and all of my classwork, but I'm just learning things all the time. And one of the things that I've been really appreciating is the network on Twitter. Even that is a learning skill. So how to post, what to post, and being brave enough to ask a few questions. And people's responses have been really enlightening and really helped me. So I'm always really grateful when people engage and share their experiences, and because it helps in my work, it helps me get a better picture of what's going on. Because ultimately, I just want to help
teachers, want to help parents, so that we can help students.
Mm. Fantastic. We've got another comment from the maths teachers group. Pac has mentioned, thanks to both of you, make some students do marking to highlight the importance of marking itself. But I also feel it's a balance, spending too much time on the handwriting can also be a problem.
Yeah, I understand that. So the really important thing with handwriting is that you don't want to be doing long sessions. So in terms of how I teach and how I tutor, it's a maximum of 5 minutes of writing a day.
Mm.
If you practice handwriting for any longer than that, really,
Mm.
and I'm talking specifically handwriting, then basically your hand gets tired because you're being really, you're paying really close attention,
Mm.
and you lose focus. And what happens when we're making letters, we're forming so that the brain can automate, essentially very simplistically, we're forming neural pathways and we're reinforcing them through practice.
Mm-mm.
And it gets to a point where the brain automates that and takes over, and you don't have to think. You don't have to think about every letter that you form.
Mm.
That's a good thing, unless you're, and it's why good subject knowledge and really good early teaching and the ability to correct is important, because once that neural pathway is formed for a letter formation, in order to change it, you need to practice it enough to make a stronger neural pathway that will supersede the pre-existing one.
Mm.
Otherwise, your brain will default to the easiest path. It will go back to those. The example I always like to give for that is, I still do this now. I changed my computer password months ago, but if I'm busy thinking about something else and I I still go. My brain defaults to the password before.
Yeah.
That neural pathway is still stronger. That memory process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the really important thing with the nice thing about handwriting is it really doesn't take very long. You want a very brief model, and then the key thing is really to get into systems. It's a really nice behaviour management system, actually, often for teachers. You just need to set up a process where students maybe come in and the first thing they do while they're settling down is write their digits in terms of maths. And then just compare them with a partner and notice the formation, and just slowing down for those few minutes can make a really, really big impact. It's not about doing one blitz on it. It's about that little daily practice. Actually, it doesn't, I know there's not time, but once you set the system up in the first place, I've been working with a student in Hong Kong this week, and I had a call with them this morning.
Cool.
So lovely to see mum's delight, actually.
Yeah.
Like, just do it 15 minutes. There's no question. Do it the weekends now. It was they only had one weekend, but she said there's no decision to be made. It's just that this is the routine now. We just keep. This is a lad that was very anti-writing, and just within a week we're seeing really big differences for him. So in terms of time, I would say it's about setting up systems and routines and understanding that it doesn't have to be very long at all. It's model, write, reflect. The reflecting is really important. Noticing the difference.
Yeah. I thought I'll just give you a live example, actually, because we had a short call beforehand just to catch up, because the last time we had a catch up, it was in a conference somewhere. But we planned it quickly, and I had to scribble some notes like, what am I going to ask Nikki, and how do we get this going? And you can probably not see it because of the glare, but it's basically it's just a bunch of scribbles. You can see it on the side view if I did there. Again, that serves the purpose of just very quickly scribbling some notes. I've got it on hand. I wanna just see what's happening. I've got a bit of maths written as well. Different.
Interesting. There was a research project done. I think it was 2015. I think it was Muller and Oppenheimer, and they got some students to watch a TED talk, and half the students took notes on devices, and half made handwritten notes. And what they found was that after a week, it was the students who had made handwritten notes that were able to remember more about the talk and to be able to apply it conceptually.
Mm.
And the maybe the part of the reason they were looking at was that when you type on a keyboard, it's very flat. You don't get the same sensory feedback
Mm.
from your fingers on the keys
Mm.
as you do from that process.
Mm.
And also, despite being told to not type everything they heard, students on devices were trying to write every word, and they weren't really engaging with the talk in terms of thinking in the same way.
Mm.
Whereas students with note taking knew they couldn't keep up and were tending to write down just keywords and key concepts. So yeah, so some really interesting studies around.
Fascinating. Yeah, I mean, I just recently put up a tweet about I've been doing Argentine tango dance lessons for about a year, and I want stuff to make sense to me, like in a scientific way. Nobody had the answers, and then I googled around and I found this Dr. Peter Lovat, who actually writes and has got a research lab just based on dancing. He puts people on MRI machines and gets them to like hold their everything steady, but they move around the legs and makes all these measurements. And he talks about this thing called sensory motor coupling. So
Yeah.
that means like you take in a stimulus, and then that stimulus causes you to make some motor movements. And for music, that seems to happen obviously quite automatically. But I think what I'm seeing from here is you get some information, and then you turn it into your own motor movement. Either that's tapping on a keyboard, which is probably is a different, obviously, because they're trying to capture everything, as opposed to more of that like fine / gross motor control. So, and that's triggering different parts of the brain. It's doing different things, and that's why.
Yeah, and this is really interesting for me because I think what happens sometimes in our education system now is things get a bit separate and fragmented.
Mm.
So one of the things when I'm talking to local authority providers, and example, is that we're focusing on phonics and reading at the moment, not handwriting, and that for me really shows that there's a lack of understanding of the process of handwriting and developing those skills. Again, there have been research projects that show that handwriting actually triggers reading circuits in the brain for early reading, and that's not really understood. Again, it all comes down to the way our brains have evolved. Being literate involves all of these factors, and sometimes when we segment them into different things,
Yeah.
then sometimes we're missing out on the opportunity of what's important about the holistic side of things.
Yeah, I mean that's why I love doing these live streams. Everyone brings in such a unique perspective, and it's an opportunity for us to learn from each other. Okay, great. Yeah, I mean, kind of wrap up in a little bit, but on a sort of practical basis, if someone was to contact you about handwriting help, whatever that means for their, could you give us a couple of case studies, what you do specifically, either online or in person, so that we can get an idea of how you can help people with their handwriting?
Okay, so the best way to, so in terms of Twitter, obviously, you can direct message me. I'm always really happy to hear from people individually. My website is called www.betterhandwritten.com. It's not better handwriting. Some people expect it to be that, but it's actually better handwritten, because for me, it's about that. Better handwriting makes us feel good, but it's about all the ways that we can use handwriting. So many things are better handwritten. So that's the website. You can contact me through that. That's where my online courses are. So there are some very simple courses with demonstration videos for that's suitable. It says age 6+, so parents can use them with children, adults can use them. There's a 6-week course for adults, and there are teacher training guides, teacher guides. So they are essentially the same content. They have got a huge amount of subject knowledge. So articles on the neural pathways, on the reasons why children reverse letters, all of those things. So there's a whole range of articles there. There's a whole chapter on systems that teachers can use to set up in their classrooms, and how they can delegate reflection and things like that. There's all of the background information, in terms of teaching, what the national curriculum requires, because
Right.
often that's misinterpreted.
Mm.
And then there's a whole range of demonstration videos by me for both printing and cursive, and then pre-cursive, because there are two styles that are generally adopted by schools. That would be a whole other debate, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we
So,
didn't get into that because I don't know enough about it, but I see like debates coming up on social
yeah, and it
media.
is really important. I do have quite, my role is to support teachers to deliver really high quality teaching with whatever their school's policy has decided. I do have opinions about it.
Mm.
I say we start that now, we might not finish.
One of the many cans of worms in supposed
Yeah.
dichotomies in teaching.
Um,
Um,
so, so that's through the website. And my email, anyone can email me as well. It's nikki@betterhandwritten.com. And I love to hear experiences, love to hear thoughts, love to take questions, and love to let you know how I can help. So, one
yeah.
thing I guess I'd like to just include is that my role is, I say, about empowering people, and often people don't realise just what they don't know. We're all like that, aren't we? We don't. It's not until we know something that we realise we didn't before.
Mm.
So one thing that sticks in my mind is a story. Prior to lockdown, I was going into schools all over Wiltshire, and one teacher had noticed that a child in their class had an uncomfortable pen hold, or she knew it wasn't the right pen hold. A lot of policies and a lot of guidance are about having a tripod grip, which is one of the most efficient styles in terms of being able to see what you write and in terms of not having pain in your wrist when you write. So other styles can have some long-term negative effects. And so she wanted to correct this child's grip. Now, the child got very, very upset and was going home and crying. And then the parent got very, very upset and came in very angry. And basically said to the child teacher, "You are not going to change we're happy with her writing, you're not to change it." And it became this really big confrontation. And what happened with that teacher was she just went, "Okay, I won't change it." And that really upsets me, because on a number of levels. One is that the child potentially might have some issues with pain later on. I'll tell you quickly about that in a moment. But also the message for the child is, I get upset about something, I go home, my parent can come and tell the teacher what to do. There's so many levels of this. I understand the emotions involved, but really, if the teacher had confident subject knowledge, she may have gone around that change slightly differently. She may have approached the parent first and said, "Look, I've noticed this. Have you? I'd like to think about changing, your daughter's grip, and this is why." And then explain that to the child, and then with the right subject knowledge, that sorry, it's my coffee. It could have been a totally different experience. Whereas what's happened is the child hasn't changed, the parent's angry with the teacher, and the teacher feels rubbish, frustrated. So that was an example of maybe like knowing that a grip is right, but not understanding why. And it's that understanding why that's really empowering. So another teacher I'm working with at the moment, he's an NQT, and he was really struggling because his pen grip was awkward. He had all four fingers on top of pen. And he's got a year 2 class, so he was struggling to model to his class. His letter formations were not in line with the school policy.
Right.
So he was really lacking in confidence. And as we said, we moved away from pain and towards pleasure. So he was always avoiding teaching his class handwriting because he felt so insecure in his ability to do it. And that's really, that is enough to do as an NQT without all of that kind of stress and worry. And it was impacting actually on the children's. But he was amazingly open-minded and used the materials that I've got in my guides. And his story was, when I was at school myself, one of my teachers pointed out that my pen grip was wrong, but said to me, "I'm not going to change it because somebody tried to change my daughter's pen grip and it made her writing worse." so we're not going to change it.
Mm.
And he therefore had this perception that it was never going to be possible to change it.
Right.
And he actually did have pain when he wrote, and right through all of his exams in secondary school and things, writing was very painful.
Right.
And he was embarrassed by it, and he was self-conscious, and he hid it.
Mm.
And that's so we changed. He writes with a tripod grip now. He's modelling to his class. He's enjoying handwriting lessons.
Yeah.
So, you know, as I say, my mission is to really empower teachers. It's not telling teachers they don't know how to teach handwriting. They learn a lot by experience, but it's adding to that knowledge and adding to their confidence and their enjoyment and their ability to help.
Yeah, obviously this discussion here started another comment by my colleague Paul Morgan, who's a chemistry tutor, and again he says, at parents' evening, my boy's teacher just said he needs to improve his handwriting as though it was my responsibility. So again, that kind of complex of issues around this handwriting, who should be doing the correction, home teacher.
Yeah, exactly. And the point is, if it needs very specific teaching. Once you've got the process. For example, the lad in Hong Kong, we've just been working on, work on very, very small units. So one of the books that I am particularly fond of, because it ties in with everything that I believe in, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. And one of the stories that he cites at the beginning is about the success of the GB cycling team. So after nearly 100 years of not winning anything,
right,
2008 Olympics, they won 60% gold medals. And the way that that was achieved was through the leadership of Dave Brailsford, who adopted an approach of tiny change, looking at everything in very detail. So to the point where they looked at the hand wash that the cyclists use. They painted the inside of the van where the team bikes were white so they could see dust more easily. So these tiny, paying attention to little details and addressing each little thing over a period of time, it's a long-term thing, obviously, that's where you get success, by this incremental change in the right direction. And the lad, for example, in Hong Kong this week, his C's were tilting forward, which I'm not very good at doing it on reverse. Not sure if that's the right way round.
Yeah, it looks like C, yeah.
And the reason why I was able to point out to him was like, you can see this is happening. And the reason it's tilting is just because of where you're putting your pen on your start point. It's just to be a little bit higher. And then, so, it's hard to explain verbally, but I also do that with demonstration with him. So it's about knowing what to do. And unfortunately, it's not just about giving children worksheets. And then, what they do then is they try and interpret the shape of letters that they're seeing, and they try and recreate it in the best way that they can.
Right.
And that sometimes leads to formation that doesn't facilitate joining and things like that. But yeah, I understand that. It's about knowing, so what to do.
No, that's great. Yeah, and thanks for all the website information. It looks like you've got a ton of real value in there by all those videos. You've obviously committed yourself to making those videos before all of the pandemic happened. You were online already before. You're one of the people who are slowly progressing into this new medium of sharing information through a website, making videos, doing this live stuff. So I'm really excited about where things go for you from this point onwards. It's obviously this technology is very, very useful now for
yes, I mean, the way that I work online, for example, with people that aren't close, is a mixture of I send emails, I record videos with demonstrations, I send photo examples, they send photos of their practice to me, with they circle what they think is their best example. I annotate that, often just on my phone with markup, and then resend it to them. So, as you know, with tutoring, it's this engagement, this dialogue. And in terms of children, a big part of my role is supporting the parent, because parents have so much stress and they want so much. So, for me, it's about supporting everyone.
Well, Paul's got a cracking question. I think we must answer that one before we depart. It's got, what do you think of pen licenses? Paul Morgan says so.
Oh, pen licenses. Mixed feelings. Obviously, we're always trying to find ways to motivate children, and it's good for them to have something to aspire to. But there's going to be a proportion who really that's great for, and it's always going to be a proportion where it's more difficult, and they're always going to be the last one to get their pen license. So the only thing I could say is, for example, a friend of mine, her son had real difficulty with handwriting. The pen license became a massive thing to him. It was really funny. He was quite embarrassed that he hadn't got his. He didn't get his till the end of year 5. But it's interesting talking to them. Like when he did get it, he was incredibly proud that he got it. So I think it's for these things. It's like any kind of reward system. There are issues you've got to be very, very mindful of, and it can be extremely frustrating. So if you're going to use pen license, you've got to put the intervention in to support students who, through no fault of their own, have more difficulty with motor control. And it's not just motor control, it's their visual perception. And it's the pre-teaching, it's what they've come, what habits they've established previously. That, again, through no fault of their own, that's their interpretation, and they've automated maybe an incorrect information. You see children as well, where they when the working memory is thinking about content and it's thinking about what to write and word choices and formulating sentences, if that process, for example, of joining is not automated, then they won't do it. Too much for the working memory, it's too much.
Yeah, of course.
So you'll see children where teachers maybe have a high expectation that their writing has to be joined all the time. And you'll see children going back and putting in lines afterwards. Because they're either worried they're going to get into trouble or have to spend their playtime rewriting. Or, so I think these things have to be handled really, really sensitively and very mindfully. It's on a one level, it's like, yes, that's going to motivate them. But there are sort of dangers to that too.
Yeah, I mean, I teach completely online, so I've got my youngest duties are 7, and we pretty much from the outset start using bid paper, and this is a graphics tablet pen which works on a USB graphics tablet, and I tell them straight away, you've got the pen license, you can use 180 colors on this pen, and if you make a mistake, press undo, because the entire mistake, there's no smudge or anything, it's just like the whole thing is erased, and they're braver in writing because a mistake doesn't cost them anything.
It's a different tool though. That's, you won't get the same experience. So I love using the graphics tablet too. I do that with them. So I was using that yesterday with somebody, and not for handwriting particularly though. You can improve those skills, but yeah, children get really excited by that. And that's the other thing. It's a different tool. So there's going to be a period of change where your brain has to process the way that works differently. And often at primary school, when children move from pencil to pen, which is they get that pen license, get their pen, and then they get very, very upset because their handwriting can look worse. They actually want to go back to their pencil. But what it is, it's the brain just needs time to adjust, and they need to be reassured that this is perfectly natural, that whenever you change something, there'll be a period where it feels worse initially, you get adjusted to it, and that just by practicing a little bit and often, it will soon feel normal.
Yeah. Fantastic. I'd really love to go into another call where we're going to like the nuts and bolts of it. Maybe we get you a document camera or something where you can actually show handwriting.
Yeah, I'd love to show people how slow it needs to be and how little practice. People. That's when the parent this week saying, "Wow, I'm amazed at how little you have to do." In a sense, I thought. But she started to understand that actually it's quality, not quantity.
Right. And
when I go into schools, often what I see is that there's too much handwriting practice in one session. So the quality, and that means that those formations, don't get reinforced as we want them to.
Fantastic. Yeah, we'll arrange another one where we maybe get you a document camera, or we'll find some way of doing it.
Yeah, I've got my visualizer. I do a lot of this online, and then
of course you'll have it. Yes, and I've got mine, and I think we dive deep into it. So I can be your test pupil and see.
Really love that.
Yeah, put me on the spot. I'd love that, and we'll.
A lot of feedback is that once people get, I always recommend also with practice, once you get going, putting on some really nice piano music. I use Ludovico and Wadi a lot. There's lots of music for concentration on YouTube and things, because there's a rhythm. And a lot of people, when they do their practice, it becomes very therapeutic and very meditative. You have to be very present with what you're doing. So there's a whole host of benefits if you can integrate it.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
We're
shut
getting
me
a
up.
bunch of. Yeah, no, it is. It's all about learning, teaching, being present. The whole thing is like life's holistic. All these things are connected. That is changing. It's life changing work. Like maths for me is a way of doing life changing work. Handwriting for you is doing life changing work. My
Yeah.
dance instructor is doing life changing work. My singing instructor is doing all of these things are connected, and it's a holistic. That's why I love sort of getting different people from different fields on these live streams. Brilliant. So yeah, we'll wrap it up for now, and there'll be a recording of this online. You can contact Nikki through the website she mentioned. I'll plug it on Twitter, Facebook, various channels, and yeah, thank you very much for your time, Nikki.
Thank you for having me. It's just really nice to chat. Really, really enjoyed it, and looking forward to hearing perhaps from some people with their experiences and any questions.
Brilliant. So I'm just gonna stop streaming, and then me and you will have a short chat, and then yeah, we can go from there. All right. Thanks, Nikki.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Bye.